conclude it and reflect on it, on my time as an ambassador here to the Court of St. James's. And secondly, I'd like to talk about the new government and our current agenda in Kyrgyzstan. And maybe third, I could stop and discuss maybe have questions and maybe argue a bit about some of the latest controversies I found myself in, namely my criticism of NGOs and of media and of the elections past Sunday and other things. So I arrived here as an ambassador on July 30th of 2019, around 2 weeks after Mr. Johnson, the current Prime Minister, was appointed. And it was a very interesting moment. I had been out of any government job for around, for at least 8-9 years. People would come in, many of the international researchers and Kyrgyzstan specialists would fly in Kyrgyzstan or would write, or we would meet, and they would ask me what is my job, and I would be answering, I am bitter on Twitter. I was full-time engaged in ongoing criticism 24 hours a day on about all the wrong ways the Atambayev administration was wrong, and in the squandering the great historic opportunity received in April 2010, when more than 65 young heroes, they paid with their blood and with their very lives to remove the Bakiyev administration and install a new government. And of course, before then, I had been I already by 2012-13, I was already all over the press saying that actually I'm one of the few people who won very clearly from April 2010, because I was able to return from I was a refugee in Sweden, and I could return from exile, and there were several dozen people at least a dozen people who returned from their time abroad, but maybe a few hundred people who won from April 2010, notably, of course, the rich, whatever oligarchs we had, because before April 7, 2010, they didn't sleep very well, thinking what kind of phone calls they're going to get from what Bakiyev family member, demanding whatever payouts or, maybe jailing them. But suddenly, because of this popular revolt and riot, and, they were all, not only they were free and powerful, but also they could actually take advantage of the parliamentary system to have their own private, members of parliament, and be 5 or 6 of them. They would be able to carve out government positions and appoint people from the street, or anybody, next morning could become a minister. They themselves went on to occupy such positions of power and prestige as presidents of the National Olympic Committee and all this sort of things. So I was actually decrying all this pseudo-democratic spectacle as actually much worse in the results to the people of Kyrgyzstan, benefiting only a few people, a few hundred people at most, who were, who could continue to enrich themselves or occupy positions. But I always knew that this is going to end in a big debacle, and this is not going to bring anything good. And I don't delete my tweets, and it's all there. Of course, that's it. And so when in 2017 we had presidential elections, I rooted actually for a different presidential candidate, not the one who won, not the one who was being promoted by that President Atambayev, not Soronbay Jeenbekov. I was quite very vocal and visible against him. I was actually rooting for the younger individual, Emirbek Babanov, who I hope to serve in his administration. But actually, he did lose one way or another, at the cost of almost causing a war with our brotherly neighbor Kazakhstan. It's a long story. Look it up. One of you should be writing a PhD on it. And actually, I came in. Soronbay Jeenbekov won. He won. I was very sad to see him win from the first round, but it was very clear that it was, you lose elections. And we have had one of the big things we have, and this is not going to change. We have free and fair elections in Kyrgyzstan. It's not only because of our traditions and because of the hard-fought, struggle to achieve it, but also because of the modern technologies. In Kyrgyzstan, we have a biometrically ensured one voter, one vote system. We have electronic, scanners that scan ballot papers, and quite a state-of-the-art system. So it was clear, when people have spoken, sometimes you don't agree with the result, and Soronbay Jeenbekov has won. But actually, I was one of the first people to congratulate him, because I think it is important in a democracy to recognize the results of the elections, even when you don't like them. Especially if you don't like them, you have to bow your head to the people who have spoken and recognize the authority, the new constitutional legitimate powers to be, and actually swore your allegiance. And I usually do it. I've done it quite a lot. I believe in democracy. I remain a steadfast supporter. You cannot dedicate your youth to the causes and human rights and democracy and suddenly, turn up and betray all these values, as a lot of people back home will have you believe. It's not true. This is the real democracy, that you have to abide by some rules and by some, sometimes people are not right, but this is their people. And, this is the democracy. And actually, of course, I really knew what was going on at the end of 2017. I can't really go into detail. I don't want to spend, but actually there's a good story how I ended up as an ambassador here. Because I actually did play a very important role in strengthening Jeenbekov's administration, and because Atambayev really wanted him to be a nominal Medvedev type of figure, whereas he would be controlling from behind the scenes. And of course, I believe I remember very well describing him as, imagining himself as a Ayatollah Khomeini or Bidzina Ivanishvili in Georgia, or that Plakhatnyuk in Moldova, or, and, Deng Xiaoping or Vladimir Putin. Somewhere from behind the curtains, he controls the parliamentary majority. And he basically was telling everybody that the newly elected president was nobody, and nobody should listen to him, both internally and outside the country. And of course, I, as a good Democrat, I did not agree with it, and I served to play up the newly elected president and actually deepen the rift between the two. And I knew that sooner or later Atambayev is going to start, his own play against the newly elected president, but I could not imagine that it would come within weeks, and within, and by March, elections were in October. By March, it was all over. And I remember I actually, not too many, but it's very interesting. I promise you. Anyways, I had a few conversations with President Jeenbekov, but it was very clear to me that he was not a visionary. In fact, I told him that, I went to him with 3 pages of my bullet points, of my ideas of what he could be doing actually to strengthen his rule by becoming more popular, by using and riding the new wave as a fresh honeymoon, because that lasts very short. And in fact, I remember I sat down and I said that my first bullet point, and he actually said, no, this is going to get stolen. This is going to be end up lesson. And I remember I shut down my folder and I told him, like, you are no Lee Kuan Yew, you are not an Atatürk, you are just a night watchman. You don't want it. Instead of tearing apart these walls and building some skyscrapers, you sit here and, it was quite harsh, but it's true. I'm not making this up. I told him, and I knew and I made him known that I do not have any intention of working in his administration or being anywhere close to him. But they needed to do something with me. They didn't want me to turn bitter on Twitter against them. So they had to offer me something. And eventually, they offered me. I actually wanted any ambassadorship. There's always talk about ambassadorships, but I always knew that if I would be an ambassador, it would be only to London. But I did not ask for it. He offered himself, but then I waited for much longer than I thought I would have been appointed. I actually wanted to be at that. His Royal Highness Prince Harry's wedding. I didn't make it. I actually arrived several months afterwards. Anyways, as an ambassador, of course, I arrived here in all of us love politics, and especially English, British politics are the best of politics we can watch. I'm sure French and Italian and Spanish and Japanese politics are no less interesting. But English politics, we all understand, right? Because we all read English, we all understand, we all know the history of all these great institutions, the mother of parliaments, number 10. And so I am so much thankful for being here and watching it, first row. It was, I think, great time in any politics, in any stretch of national history. It's of course I remember these times, and I will never forget. You will never forget as well. But the fall of 2019. But I remember it was very funny. I wanted to follow this, and I remember trying to read everything, all things, and all the newspapers, and all the magazines, and of course you find yourself overwhelmed like this, because the British are very, very, the chattering classes, twittering, all the classes. It's just overwhelming. And one of the big lessons I learned very early on was when there was some gossip, and then of course it starts as a gossip, and then Lara Kunzberg reports, and then it ends up in or is it Telegraph first, or is it her who gets her insights? We know from who nowadays, but there will be early parliamentary elections on October 15th, they said. And of course, me as a very inexperienced diplomat to the Court of St. James's, I write a very urgent cable back home saying that, the number 10 believes that October 15 is a parliamentary election, so this is it. Because it's confirmed by several newspapers, I talked, and so October 15th. And I plan myself like October 15th is the date, because number 10 said so. But of course, it doesn't take place. It does not, because it turns out there are other forces in place, and so I actually learned quite, it was a very important lesson. I remember it very well, because I understood that actually, British politics is not what the number 10 says. It's very fluid, it's very competitive, and actually they will test the ideas in newspapers, and it doesn't mean really anything. But it was a fascinating story, and fast forwarded to the December 2019 elections, a triumphant night. I stayed up all night watching the election returns. And I actually really believed that, here comes the new administration. Boris is going to rule for 15, 20 years. And this is it. We will have a stable, government here in London to work with. And I know who to, establish contacts with, and then of course we waited for January, February. But it's one important story is that when I arrived in London as a Kyrgyz ambassador, I discovered that actually London is not considered as an important capital by my ministry. The Kyrgyz government does not. The Kyrgyz president hadn't visited. Usually any Kyrgyz president, they will visit Berlin, Paris, Brussels, but they don't bother with London. And the last time the foreign minister visited, the Kyrgyz foreign minister was invited, or he visited, was in the year 2000. And so I was really very eager to get our foreign minister visit London and to have the bilateral relations going on. But anyways, of course, within this first 6 months, I received a very good advice by a good friend of mine, a British diplomat, Robin Ord-Smith, who advised me that the first 6 months are very important for a new ambassador. You need to accept every invitation. You need to go anywhere. You need to go. After 6 months, you can be picky, or you can just kick back and don't do anything. But the first 6 months, you really need to make your presence. And actually, I was very active. I went to, if I had the reception, and London is one of those capitals where you will have diplomatic receptions, like 3 or 4 every night. And I actually, I went, enjoyed, and at some point, a Slovak ambassador told me that he saw of me more in 4 weeks than my predecessor in 4 years. But I took it as a good sign, and I continued, and I went. But actually, by February, I already was starting, because drinking wine every night, and and dressing up, and and being active and pretending like you are a good conversationalist. I actually understood that I don't really have to go to reception by Botswana or by other countries. That actually I know what to do. I need to be focusing on the important issues that matter to my country and pursuing them, laser focus. And I already had a string of our own events lined up at tourism events at the National Geographic Society, and we took some other things. And I remember I managed to get Stanley Johnson, the elder Johnson, to join one of our events, and I was very happy how I achieved it. Anyways, but actually, of course, March 2019, when at the end of the 6 months I was just getting ready to focus on my real work, that's when we started really getting, one event, another event was, starting canceling, and I could not believe, we all remember, we couldn't believe that it would last for weeks when they said there will be a lockdown. We said, okay, oh, of course, well, maybe. But of course, then it lasted. But thankfully, it lasted through, it's continued. But then, of course, we had, by October 2020, we in July 2020, we had a very serious outbreak. I still consider this the most dramatic, maybe the catastrophic events in our first 30 years of national history, when we had this a huge outbreak of COVID in July 2020. And basically our healthcare system was overwhelmed, and there was very dramatic scenes. Thankfully, it lasted just a week, 2 weeks. It peaked very quickly. The fire was very devastating, but it was very short, and it was also limited to Bishkek. It didn't go to rural areas. But I still believe to this day that the events of October 2020 and the subsequent fall of the Jeenbekov regime is explained only by the absolute popular disillusionment, disgust, or absolute loss of any trust in the regime. We never dealt with the situation. I remember in the spring I was advising to be paying out money to cash dispersals and doing some very massive public works program employment and other things. And of course, in October 2020, we had elections, parliamentary elections, which, while free and fair, they were dominated by money. And there was a huge vote buying effort by, the people who were, Rainbek Matraimov and etc. and a few others who, I don't want to really go into detail, but he was the person, one of the people who who generated quite illicit, unbelievable amounts of wealth. And actually, of course, they built quite a big system of paying out to the various government officials, maybe going all the way to the top. And then they thought that, to complete that circle, they would own the parliament by running a few political parties at 2 or 3, and by financing the very massive vote buying scheme. And then votes, of course, cost not cheap, maybe $50, and then some areas $100 per vote. But it was worth them for them. You buy 2 million votes, and it's really worth. You own the country. You own the country. And so we learned next day, or actually that night, that we were all shocked to learn that 90 seats out of 120 would be dominated by the political parties which are controlled by that group. And then, of course, the other political parties and the rest, they actually did not agree. It's usual. They hit the streets. They protest. I personally thought that, this is, nobody actually expected. Lots of opposition people I was talking to, they said, oh, come on, let's do it. Let's save us a face. And so we will protest, but nothing is coming out. They were very disbelief, but actually when we were watching, it quickly unfolded, specifically because it was not really fueled by the election protest. It was the popular opinion was very much against the presidency of Jeenbekov because of that COVID disaster. And within an hour, we saw very popular, pop stars of Kyrgyzstan, who actually very, very loyal to the regime. They don't care about politics, but actually they went to the rally and they would be saying and demanding and actually, of course, I remember very clearly saying that this is it. If that pop star is out and demanding the end of the regime, he's out. The president is, but actually we fought for quite a while, to keep the president intact, maybe by having concessions, by forming a coalition government, maybe by promising the new elections, but it would not help. At the end, he had to resign. Well, it's a very long story. I'm actually going through very much detail, but anyways, fast forward to, nowadays as an ambassador, I already couldn't be, I had very big unstable government already back home. And I remember actually quite a lot of British friends who were following the news. They would be sending me these messages, well, Edil, I hope you are safe. And then, of course, I would be like, my neighbor asked me, like, Edil, I hope you are safe. And I was like, well, of course I'm safe. I'm like, I'm in the safest street, I 2 floors below you. The thought of me losing my job over this, of course, wouldn't occur to me because, a lot of people, of course, they were asking me not for my physical safety. They were, they thought your job is safe, but I actually thought about it only several months afterwards. But of course, I never cared about my job. But I knew that any sane people, of course, they will keep me away from anywhere. But anyway, the President Japarov. I wanted to discuss his persona a bit later, but anyways, this ambassadorship. it was very unstable already. You know, I couldn't really build much because we had we postponed elections. The old parliament stayed on. We had constitutional reforms. I traveled back home to join the Constitutional Council, and it was clearly we wanted to move away from this pseudo fake parliamentary democracy, which was dominated by money and big money bags, towards the presidential system. And with now shame and without feeling this apologetic, like, oh, we're building an authoritarian country. Yes, we are building an authoritarian government to deliver for the people. And we believe, we shouldn't apologize for this. If some people believe that the function of government is to deliver entertainment and good stream of, very funny news about this fighting with this, and we have a very interesting, for the last 20 years, we had the most interesting, political thing. It's nowhere else comes, so many unexpected, but actually the government was a failure, and we've become a failed state, as illustrated by all kinds of scenes from our recent history. So that when people like me, we want to say, no, the state must deliver for the people. We need order, we need law, we need efficient government, we need good healthcare, we need modern schools. If that is, I'm criticized for that, you want to, build an authoritarian government, I don't really have time to argue with those people. Anyways, and my ambassadorship continued. I had some calls to return home and maybe join them, but I actually was so much, because lockdown was still continuing, I really wanted to complete a lot of other things. And then, of course, fast forward, and then the May 2021, this year, we had the events related to around our largest gold mine, Puntor, and the Canadian, the listed international corporation Centera. And that has dominated my last few months of trying to deal with the international press here, with the international analysts, and it really distracted me. But I had been resisting. So anyways, yesterday I saw Minister Morton, Wendy Morton, the junior minister in the Foreign Office, and I actually told her that how much I am sorry that I could not really deliver for our bilateral relations as an ambassador. My ambassadorship was cut short because I was recalled a month ago as a deputy prime minister. But hopefully, I complimented, of course, my good friend and colleague vis-a-vis in Bishkek, Charles Garrett. Relations are in good hands there in Bishkek, represented by Her Majesty's ambassador to Kyrgyz Republic. But actually, we are going to continue on. I think I'm going into too much detail. Secondly, so what is this new cabinet of ministers? And actually, of course, there I had been long resisting calls to join this new makeup. I started receiving calls since early May. They said, there will be this cabinet and you'll become a deputy. And deputy for what? Deputy for this, what's used to be called for the social sector, social bloc. So it's a very large portfolio, which ranges from education, healthcare, culture, tourism, disabled women, pensions, poverty, language, and it's very, very large. I actually like to call it actually deputy for expenditures. Other people get to earn, and all the budget, expenditures are, what you spend money on is what I am. But it's actually, in previous governments, it, of course, was a very, very junior position, usually occupied by a woman, and by a string of women, like they don't, they change every year. And not very notable, unfortunately, and not much respect of mine or the society. And actually, it was the position. I was like, no, why would I go there and take that kind of position? No, my ambassadorship outranks that kind of position. I'm much more important. No mentioning that I'm enjoying my life here. being an excellency, His Excellency, My Excellency. But actually, of course, to this day, quite a lot of people do not understand that this is not an old government or old governments from the past, where Kyrgyz government was a very weak and very nominal institution, even in the under the pseudo parliamentary system. Of course, the real power always was in the presidency. So the presidential administration, any clerk in the presidential administration, of course, outranked any social vice prime minister or even prime minister. And so it was a very junior position. But because of the new constitution, the government and the presidential administration, they are now combined. They are single administration. Like, imagine the White House. You don't have a separate government and separate administration. So, for example, our chairman, the prime minister, is at the same time chief of staff to the president. So we have combined this. And so me now as a deputy prime minister, I didn't realize it actually until several days into my new position, or maybe next day. And then, of course, I had a smile on my face instead of decrying my time in London, lost ambassadorship. But actually, of course, lots of people do not understand that this is a new government, new cabinet of ministers, new presidential administration, and this is not a that kind of much weaker position. And also, because, like it or not, I also, not to talk too much about it, I don't want to give away too much, but, I am a politician. And I can be young, but I actually enjoyed very much a recent article where they said, Edil has been an active politician for the last 20 years. And actually, of course, when you talk about the recent shift and change in generations of the politicians, actually, I speak my mind, and I'm allowed, and I actually asked to be active politically by my both the prime minister and the head of state. And actually, sometimes I don't ask them for the permission. I actually speak my mind and actually let everybody know what I think. So the cabinet of ministers is all about government efficiency. It's about good governance. It's about making sure that Kyrgyzstan does not continue on this slippery road I don't want to offend Afghanistan, but this is our very beloved neighbor in Central Asia, and we know what happens to those states where the government disintegrates. And this is actually, we were on that slope, cutting down government expenses, cutting down the services, thinking that the free market will take all, thinking in all these neoliberal ideas of that the market takes care of all. And if you are rich, good. If you are poor, and then of course the religion comes in, right? It's not as, it's not a by chance that religion starts spreading in that type of situations, because not only that the ruling classes are interested that you believe that the real life is afterlife, you should actually behave and obey and actually keep your mouth shut, but also the people want that kind of philosophy sort of to understand all the injustices and internalize. So all the big boost in religion also is related to our state actually abandoning the people and shutting down itself, and all under the pretext of the big ideas of neoliberalism, which I used to be a big adherent to. When you emerged, I was 14 when the Soviet Union collapsed, but of course I had been reading all the Moscow perestroika newspapers, and I hated, of course, communism. We all wanted, supermarkets have, 40 or 60 kinds of sausages, and so when we were told that, and we all hated communism, and we all went from the extreme left to the extreme right. And I used to be that kind of, Hayek person, libertarian and this type of things. Of course, I had returned, and the older I grow, I grow actually to the left. Anyway, so this government is about government efficiency. And this government, we know that we are number 36 or 37 government in 30 years of national history. Nobody is taking us seriously, especially me. But we don't have much of interest telling people, oh, please believe us, we are so good, we are so visionary, we are going to change the world. Actually, there's a big criterion. One measure of success is what the president has tasked us, and our current Prime Minister Akalbek Chaparov agreed to, is doubling the state revenue in 2 years. It's not an easy task for any country to accomplish, especially in the post-pandemic period. But this is what we are going to do. Any government, we cannot just go around and starting, printing money or begging our neighbors or richer countries for money. We believe that we have the resources to lift ourselves, and that's the only way to do. And that's the government revenue. It's about administration. It's all about making sure that people pay customs duties and pay their taxes. It's about better administration. And in essence, this is real fight against corruption. Not jailing people, not generating headlines, not speaking with big, loud voice, about how you are honest and everybody is a crook, but it's actually making sure that government and laws work. And this is going to be not an easy task, because people do not want to pay taxes. Businesses, all the people online, they will hate all those customs officials who turned billionaires. But guess what? We all have been benefiting from that system. All businesses much prefer paying 1/10 of what they owe to the state and pay to that crook. And of course they will decry and they will complain and they will, tweet and post on Facebook. But actually, it will hurt. It is going to hurt. It's already hurting lots of businesses, because only recently last week we discovered that rice, a very big commodity in Kyrgyzstan, imported into Kyrgyzstan, they pay taxes even after they said, oh, we made sure that everything is transparent, everything, 100% of rice deliveries are being, recorded and being applied, taxes applied. We discovered that actually the nominal price of what they paying, that is like 3 soms per kilogram. 3 soms is like a fraction of a cent, and of course, this is how we're going to, we have already exceeded, actually, good news. Already the goal for this year, instead of 380 or 280, we already collected 308 billions of soms. And then, of course, taxes. Also tax administration. And thankfully, again, not only better administration, but also a very active use of the most, they're not even modern. Many other countries have been using this sort of blockchain technologies, or tracking the goods, or using the various mobile technologies to track people and goods. So this is it. This cabinet will be judged on one criterion alone. Either we succeed in doubling our revenue, and that will open up a great many opportunities to improve our government services in education, healthcare. Hopefully it will return the trust of the international partners, and they will start believe, but we are not in the rush of persuading them. We are telling them, please watch us do these things ourselves, and then hopefully we can talk. But also there is a very important message saying that, you know, our president and prime minister, they repeat this phrase: we need to get rid of this syndrome of a poor country. But of course, in this calls, it will be a dependency syndrome. Dependency syndrome. Anything, everything, you know, after the government revenue has been cut, services cut, everything is cut. You know, of course, what remains is the state. Actually, one function of the, you know, they would be judging their success by asking for money, by begging for money, outsiders, foreign governments, especially Russia, Turkey, China, and also increasingly, you know, Middle Eastern foundations who have built all the mosques. You know, they cannot build more mosques, so they started building, you know, social housing, hospitals, and other things. So, and but this dependency syndrome that we are poor state, not, you know, that we are not, we don't have anything, you know, to help ourselves. And of course, we know how it traumatizes and absolutely deprives a poor person. You know, when, you know, it's psychology. You know, you feel powerless. It works also for the states. You know, when a state, when your leadership believes that, you know, the only thing that the state cannot do anything, we are dependent on external things. That's why this cabinet actually believes that no, we are not a poor state. We are a developing nation. Of course, judged by all the international rankings, we probably belong to the lowest 10 or 20, because nominally that's where we are. But of course, we are a very educated society. We continue to be. We are many other things. You know, one of the first events I had back home as a vice prime minister, I hosted a online virtual, you know, about on vaccination, on COVID situation. And I remember the one of the government, one of the healthcare ministry officials, when I checked, like, you know, but vaccination is still very low. It's nowhere to go. You know, you know, it's very, very low. And actually said, no, actually we are praised by the our international partners, you know, UNICEF or World Health Organization. And I told them, you know, I couldn't resist. I actually tried to be very polite, but I actually was very angry. I said, you know, please do not tell us anymore that you are praised by this international organization, because you know what? They are happy if you are a bit better than Somalia or Afghanistan, because to them, in their charts and rankings, you look like that. So if you're beating their expectations, they're happy for you. But we are not the countries in the rankings. We are a different country. We compete with Eastern Europe, and we belong to the likes of the countries, not the way they nominally in their ranking. So, of course, the international expectations and the sort of attitude to us as a, you know, they hardly disguise their attitude to us as a failed state. You know, this must change, and this will change. This has changed, hopefully. And we are not in a rush of trying to persuade them and falling all over, you know, in trying to win their support and opinion.
I'll give you 5 more minutes.
Well, I am about this. So this, let me just conclude by saying this about the vertical. You know, so in Russian there's this word about управляемость. Maybe it's in English it's manageability, governability. So again, we are, you know, we have introduced all kinds of democratic rules and, you know, local government, self-government. All kinds of, you know, elections, local council elections and everything, they're all in place, but they've proven a disaster. It's not only theoretically, it's experimentally. The last 10, 15 years, we saw that instead of what we had thought as democratic activists, after we allow all the local councils take over that there will be this beautiful NGO people, very educated local intelligentsia, teacher, by coming together and ruling their own community as it was supposed to happen. Actually, they did. First few efforts they did, but then, of course, quickly it turned in taking over of our local democratic institutions by one organized force, which is on that local level. It's of course organized crime, and all this organized crime by local hooligans who just actually took over all these democratic institutions and abused all this democracy in their own effort. So, again, we are reintroducing so that there's a very powerful governors who can appoint, and again, we have introduced a system of local heads of rayon administrations who will be professionalized increasingly. We've lost all the cadre of trained, prepared administrators. But we have to do with who we have, but actually we're trying to rotate them from different areas and educate the new generation of able administrators. And then, of course, we've introduced that the heads of Edil, the village heads, they will be actually also administrators being appointed and not elected by local councils. They will be still accountable to local councils, but we have this vertical of power that we need to improve the governability of our state. I had one thing to talk about maybe about the elections on Sunday, November 28th. We had parliamentary elections, and these elections, the new parliament. So if the old parliament was 120 members, all elected according to the proportional party list, but of course those elections, party lists would be drafted by owners of that party according to the money, and even after they were elected, they would be changed all the mandates. You vote thinking that this type of people will come to power, but actually they are thrown out, and instead, the usual, they occupy the seats. So this time, our president really wanted to return to the single mandate districts. He represented the popular opinion, and the people were overwhelmingly behind him, and they still are. That actually there is a disgust against this party oligarchy built, which did not have any relation with the people whatsoever. He wanted to return to the single mandate districts, direct constituencies, elections. But actually, of course, we persuaded him in the middle, so that it is a 90-seat chamber, single chamber, and 36 MPs are elected directly from constituencies, single mandate districts. And then the rest, 54 seats, are elected according to the party list, but party lists, they will be open, what's called preferential system. So the voter, and I call it, of course, the most progressive Scandinavian countries, lots of, very few European countries they employ, then it's you vote for your party, but also you have the opportunity to also vote for the individual in that in the party list of that political party. So, you can, the voters, they have, it's a real display of democracy that you can actually still vote for your own preferred candidate even within that party list. So 54 MPs were elected this Sunday. This was to be a triumphant hour for our president because they were the cleanest elections. He did not nominate his own party. He said, and he rightfully said that people support him, but he doesn't need to, he doesn't want to repeat the mistake of having another dominant political party. Maybe he will come to regret it later on, but so far the people were, you know, and all the political communities, they celebrated this. Lots of opposition leaders, they said that it's, you know, they were the freest elections. Anybody, all the political parties could occupy any square, any hall they wanted. All the media, of course, you know, nobody needs anymore those old media. Everybody's on Facebook, right? And WhatsApp. And all these sort of things that went, it was absolutely beautiful, unhindered elections, maybe a bit of low interest to the real issues because, you know, the people really know what was all about. And then, of course, the night of the elections, it all almost collapsed because, you know, after the polls close in your countries, you know, what you see on the screen is the exit poll, right? It's very accurate to the point. In our country, because of the state-of-the-art electronic system, we see actual results because this electronic, you know, the ballots are scanned, you know, and all the electronic, urne? Boxes, yes, ballot boxes. They actually, of course, report the, you know, towards the system, and it's all displayed on the scene. And I remember we had all top leaders of the country. We were watching the screen, and like, you know, of course, we had, you know, as any government, we you know, we have access to the, you know, the polling, right? You know, we know that what kind of. We were expecting 5 parties to win, and then we watch, and then suddenly we see that 10 parties made it. 10 parties made it, including some of those people who I was already had a draft saying like, oh, goodbye, you know, you are old, you are retired, you have my respect, but please do keep your opinion with yourself. You know, I was supposed to have my great night on the, you know, TV that night, and suddenly I see they are all elected, and this passed, that passed, and we all look at each other, and we say, well, you know what's happened? Clearly disappointed. You know, I'm almost angry. I'm saying, like, you know what? This is what you get when you don't nominate your own party. This is what you get when people are lost. Well, clearly we did something wrong. But okay, anyways, okay, well, they will be a minority. We still have the dominant majority. Okay, well, we can live with that. Or maybe it's better to have them inside the parliament rather than in the streets. You know, but there's still something wrong. And then, of course, it continues for 20 minutes. We do some other things. I actually, you know, and I'm already on the news, you know, with Prague. Then we return, and then we see suddenly the leading opposition party that was supposed to have 67,000 votes, they had it on the table. We saw it. And suddenly we see them, they have now 41,000. And it's like, you know, what's going on? How can it be? And of course, me as a democratic activist, I think somebody is tampering with the computer. They didn't like the results, and somebody is doing something to delete the opposition. And I grow even more angry. And people are confused. And you know, our prime minister also looks and says, but on the other hand, this reflects accurately what we all know was supposed to happen, what the people believes, that only 5 or 6 parties pass. But, you know, it's something going wrong. And of course, I know that if we are confused and if I'm angry, I can imagine the whole, everybody else steaming and maybe bursting and maybe already coming with those forklifts, you know, fork knives, you know, to remove us from our seat. And actually, I, of course, take a picture of this thing and I tweet. I say, we're looking exactly on the same screens. We are as confused as everybody else. We don't know what's going on. This is the Central Election Commission must be doing something. They better know what they're doing. They better understand, explain what they're doing, but this is not us. We are watching, the people have spoken. We don't know what are the results. And actually, of course, I go straight to our most popular media. It's actually American-funded Radio Liberty, and I'm online and actually also explaining them. You know, I'm as confused as everybody. But I say this electronic information. What counts is what the real results are the ballots, the real paper ballots, all these scans, all this information, all this modern technology, they can be tampered with. What counts is that at 2,500 or 900 polling stations at this moment, as we speak, all our compatriots, good men and women of our country, they're counting real ballot papers, and this is what we need to wait for. Let's not believe the previous table or the current results. They don't matter at all. Let's wait for the real results. But of course, within an hour or two, we learned what went wrong. There was nothing wrong with the server. There was nothing wrong with the way the ballots were, scanned and counted. It's a typical bug. It's Excel sheet. One of the columns you make the wrong formula and suddenly it's double the results, because instead of counting only the votes for the party, because in one ballot you have the one party vote and another the preferential vote for the individual candidate in the list according to the numbers. So in that table that was being projected, it was a bug that suddenly everybody's results were twice inflated. And actually, what we later realized while we were counting the mandates for every party of our opposition opponents received, some other journalists and people online, they actually counted the number of percentage points, and they realized that at the end it's 150%. The votes would be counted and add up to 150. So, but of course, this was a major disaster. Much worse words can be used, because instead of our triumph, instead of us saying that we delivered, look, the people have spoken, they support the president, we had the cleanest elections whatsoever, we have the real result in forming the parliamentary majority, but comfortably. A lot of the opponents, a lot of the old guard, goodbye, bye-bye, into retirement. Instead, they were, no, we have won, we had so many mandates, it's actually you cooked up something, you're crooks, and you cannot really answer to them, because it's clearly, majorly a big disaster. And so it was a disappointment. But of course, the people are wise. Do not believe those people that people anywhere, they don't see this sort of things. They know. All people are rational. All people are good people. When you explain to them what happens, they believe you. And of course, the people of Kyrgyzstan, they believe, what happened. Quite a few people, of course, are unhappy. They were not elected. Their relatives, their parties were not elected. But this is what democracy is all about. They will have their own chance next elections. I think I will conclude at this point, and maybe we will have a more open floor.
Indeed.
Yes.
Because we know that you have to take the taxi at 12:40.
Yes.
So, which we have booked already. So, yes, thank you for full narrative. And indeed, I think the most important thing for me is to analyze the key points. You said that there is a plan to raise countries' confidence, both at the level of government, people, institutions, and you have a plan also how to resource that through getting into the real income sources from the taxes and other things and so on. So that's really exciting to see, and how that plays out and how that's supported and understood. I think we need more and more of that to be heard and explained. So I'm glad that we started here today with that particular thing. So of course, I like you, I can now start speaking. So I'm going to shut myself down and questions on the floor. Yeah, introduce yourself as well, please.
Hi, my name is Nita. I'm an MPhil student in Development Studies. I'm from Georgia, so I have a question to you about, you mentioned how, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, obviously there were a lot of these neoliberal ideas on development, and Kyrgyzstan and Georgia are no exceptions. They embrace laissez-faire capitalism as only the post-Soviet nation could. And however, I totally agree, Georgia also has this poor country insecurity and complex and syndrome that not only the people believe in, but actually I think that political elites are actually trying to make people believe this so that they don't demand more from the government on both ends of the political spectrum, even though the parties don't really differ on ideological lines, they're all right wing. What's interesting to me is how did Kyrgyzstan, I guess, what kind of urgency did neoliberal policies create in Kyrgyzstan? What kind of urgencies did it create to the point where now there's like a rethinking of development in Kyrgyzstan? Now you're thinking of doubling government revenue, and also is there support coming from the people, or is this are these policies that are popular demanded? Are people demanding these policies, or is it a more top-down effort?
Yes, it will take time. It will take time. In any vision, any leadership will require time to persuade, to communicate, and even the first months we spent forming this new administration and making sure that this, the main building, the government house, the presidential administration works. And but even then, because this government, the public servants, the essence, the backbone of any state, they will serve only incoming politicians. But the prevailing culture was, well, we don't take responsibility. They would be advising me, and then of course, I don't know if you still watch all these great British series like Yes Minister or the in the thick of it. Many times I had myself thinking of those things, because these public servants, they will be telling you, but we did it this way, usually. And of course, they perceive you as a politician, as a former, street activist who doesn't really understand how the government runs. And so they will be telling you, well, the right procedure and the right time frame for this is this. And instead, you will be telling them, because usually in the previous governments, a government decree would be the normal time frame for that would be 5 or 6 months at least. Most of the time, most of the decisions would end up not being adopted after many consultations, because at the end the prime minister would be very weak and powerless, and he would not take the political responsibility for that decision. They would be clearly very just banally afraid, because any decision, any government expenditure can be claimed by subsequent administration or by some lieutenant or major or captain in any police unit, like, oh, this was a waste. You should be imprisoned for 25 years, 3 times or something. That's why they were the paralysis of the will, and they did not want to take any responsibility. So endless discussions and consultations and roundtables and papers and discourse, because usually the finance ministry will say, this is not possible, we don't have money. Or the justice ministry says, oh, this is not right, we should do this, we should do that. And so one prime minister or one vice prime minister must resolve that sort of dispute, but they don't want to take any decisions. And therefore, it took some time, and it's actually very difficult to start this engine spin the way we want to spin. And it took some effort, even persuading the close staff members of the presidential administration that no, we will be adopting government decrees in 5 or 6 days. Some of the government decrees we adopted in 5 or 6 hours. And this is the urgency demanded by our president, and this is the urgency we feel, that time is of essence. We will take decisions. I will be taking decisions. A lot of them will be wrong. They will be wrong decisions. They will be unpopular. They will hurt a lot of those decisions. But we trying to introduce this type of culture. We can do, will do. We are, buck stops here, and this type of attitude. So of course, this is not shared by our people. If you read, Facebook or Twitter, there's so much toxic hate, literally. People wishing, yesterday I published My mother took a booster shot. She's 82. I never believed that people exist wishing death upon your mother. Why? But there is this much, the situation in the country. But I read, from day one, I said, we don't pay attention to this. I don't pay attention to this. I don't care. I claim that I deleted my mobile app on Facebook. A lot of people misunderstood. They thought I deleted myself from Facebook, but why would I, right? I just said, I'm not going to be governed by your likes or dislikes or by your reaction. And any sane government acts that way, because you cannot be ruled by the mob. They say one thing, this hour and next hour they will change completely their mind. So this is not shared universally. Lots of people, they still say, there was a very good, example of it when I leaked.
There's a question already on Zoom, so once you finish, we'll take that.
Yes. The news that, for example, that we flew to Glasgow on a private plane, on private chartered plane, because literally as an ambassador here for this Green Climate Conference, I was doing everything that a government delegation flies, commercially. Changes planes, spends a weekend in London. There's the West End. We bought opera tickets, and then boards the train to Glasgow. A beautiful landscape, arrives in Glasgow and everything. But we just couldn't manage it because the return flight from Glasgow, the next Turkish Airlines flight departs like in 48 hours, and then our president had to be, and the whole government had to be at another EU conference being hosted, regional summit in Bishkek. So literally it didn't work. We spent, my colleague here from the embassy is a witness. We spent literally weeks trying to make it work. And then the presidential airplane, the old Soviet-made 254, the UK government wouldn't accept it flying in, not only because it's not safe, old and everything, but it's literally, burns lots of, it's dirty. It's the dirtiest plane in the world, and they wouldn't allow it. So at the end of the day, we had to hire a charter plane. And of course, everybody was so unhappy that we spent 150,000 euros on chartering a plane. Who are you? Who do you think you are that you can spend that sort of money to fly to Glasgow? And all the things, on the private airplane and everything. But of course, that type of things, people will be still having. Why are you doing this? Why are you spending this? Why are you having, but that sort of public perception will probably deal for years because we will remain a poor country. But the new attitude of a confident and competent government that will be fully sovereign and will take fully national responsibilities, that we will not, that we will strive to fulfill all our duties to full extent, both to the people of Kyrgyzstan, but also as a responsible member of the international community. It will be there. But I can tell you that I don't think anywhere in the world that people will stop counting government expenditures and thinking that it is waste.
So we have two questions on Zoom. First, Dr. Iskandar Abdullahi, Deputy Director of Carrick Institute. Iskandar, please continue.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, great thanks for your highlights and mostly also touching new policies of government of Kyrgyzstan. But we locate in the region which we have a lot of interdependencies. What would be the position of government regarding trade, integration and cooperation in Central Asia? Would be something changing, or you will be more careful and selective on this? Thank you for your response.
We can take Peter Frankopan's question as well. Professor Peter Frankopan from Oxford, please.
Thanks, Montu. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Excellency, I'm still going to call you. Very interesting talk, and I love the fact that you are aficionado of Yes Minister and in the thick of it. I hope you will bring all those experiences to the civil service back in Bishkek, make everybody watch. I have a question just to ask you to cast your mind forwards. Let's say we were joining, hopefully in person, in 2030. What would be the best case scenario from where things are now for Kyrgyzstan and for the region too, but specifically for Kyrgyzstan, what do you think the direction of travel is of what we'd be looking back and saying has gone better than expected and then worse than expected?
Well, Professor, dear Peter, of course, you know,
Two questions, yeah.
Two questions. The region, I think they're all about the same because they're asking about the region and also about our individual country. But first of all, of course, Kyrgyzstan has always been the champion of open borders. In Central Asia, we were, by the nature of us being the most neoliberal and most open to the world, we never closed down borders, we never put barbed wires, etc. And we were the most democratic, and we were not shy about it. I say that the best news for the last several years for our region has been the emergence of the new government president, installation of the President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. This is the best news for Central Asia. You know, Uzbekistan is the heart of Central Asia. It's everything for Central Asia. It neighbors all of us. It's right in the center of you know, of our region. And even Uzbekistan is developing and becomes a dynamic and has become already, but they're only starting. And when they will be you know, a tiger in Central Asia, of course, it will benefit enormously all of us. We cannot be rich, safe, you know, just, you know, good neighbors if Uzbekistan is not acting, you know, as a good leader and as a good neighbor. And President Mirziyoyev is, of course, has opened his heart and his borders and his cooperation to all of us, especially to Kyrgyzstan and to Tajikistan, because, of course, for the last 2 decades, they've been giving us very much what cold shower or stick shoulder or what. So regionally, if we had Uzbekistan open and cooperative, we would never join the trading blocks with far, you know, away Belarus and Armenia, as we had to, this Eurasian Economic Union. But what's done is done. We will remain part of that regional bloc, trading bloc, but of course our future, our joint prosperity, shared prosperity is with in our home in Central Asia. And this is great news, you know, and it's actually very, you know, I decry that our local opinion and domestic analysts, they do not perceive the sea change that has happened in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. We had the privilege of being the favorite partners for the international community in Central Asia, precisely because the other regions, the other countries were closed for the international cooperation. But now we see the Uzbek foreign minister visit Washington like twice a month or every 2 months. You know, they're here every 2 months. You know, I know mentioned Kazakhstan, our, you know, great, you know, world-class the government that has ruled, you know, Kazakhstan, and they built such a prosperous and dynamic country, envy to the world. You know, those cars have taken off, the rockets, and our best hope is to catch up. And this brings me to Professor Frankopan's question, is of course, you know, regardless what we do, regardless what kind of dynamic decisions we will take, dear Peter, you know, we know that it doesn't work like this, you know, this national development only is incremental. Our main goal is at the moment that, you know, not to be outflanked by Tajikistan. You know, but you know, this is true. The vaccination rate at the moment in Kyrgyzstan, according to official statistics, is around 13% of general population. Although the healthcare ministry will publish something around 40%, but they counting over the, you know, they have some funny statistics because they have the labor migrants away, and they don't count the children because there are 2 million. We are a very young country. You know, over the half of our population is younger than 25. So they say that we shouldn't count the children because it's, you know, and that's why they have come up with one target population, and they have calculated vaccination rate according to that population, and that's around 40%. But real general population is around 13 or 14%. But of course, in Tajikistan, it is 28%. So this is
Are they counting?
According to official statistics, some of my colleagues, some of the civil servants, when they will be criticized by me and pressured against the wall, they will say, no, it's not true statistics, or we shouldn't believe it. But still, if you go to Google, and there are several world rankings, you will see that Kyrgyzstan is just above Afghanistan. You know, much worse than Pakistan, much worse than, you know, Egypt and this kind of countries. So, Peter, you know, if we will succeed in bringing together the government resources and building this government administration, at best, we will not turn into a failed state or remain a failed state and become a source of threat and danger to our neighbors. Because we already have become, you know, I'm not going to be, you know, talking open microphone here on some other threats, but we are not, you know, we are easily we can lose control over some of the places and situations. So, you know, one very clear example, the way it's going on, again, vaccination is a good case in point, is that when our nurses and doctors go around houses and they will offer and they call people to the clinic or offer like a mobile, you know, like let us vaccinate. You know, the older population, maybe older than me, and you know, people, you know, they are more or less accept. You know, they were raised in a state and a culture that believes the state, that believes the vaccines, that believes science, that you know reads the news and other things. The people actually resisting and actually shutting down doors, or maybe in some instances having their knives out and resisting and protecting their parents and grandparents, are younger people. It's you know, you wouldn't think that that would be the case. You know, in many other countries, it's the other way around. But actually, this what I was reading in my university years, that actually this is the story of it's a very typical story of a post-colonial state, right? That the quality of school education falls, and the parents are better educated than their children. And so those younger populations who are exposed to many more hours of this you know, WhatsApp and Facebook and other old kind of videos and fake news and other things, they think themselves as smarter and more educated, more world aware and other things. And so it will be very difficult for us to undo and untie all these knots, and it's probably, you know, there are very big chances that we will fail. But if we fail, I don't know who can and who will succeed.
We have one more question,
Peter. In 2030, we will be, we will have you speak in Bishkek, full of skyscrapers and electronic, you know, flying helicopter. I mean, you know, cars, and opening a new state-of-the-art. It will be the Fitzwilliam Museum that we will open there, with a wing named after you.
Okay, well, this is being recorded, so we've got it on audio and video, Edil. So I'll hold you to that.
Yes, this is going to be one of the landmarks. Jakub, introduce yourself and ask the question.
I hope that plans work out. By the way. Thank you. I'm Jakub.
Of course, I know you.
Yes. Nice to see you as well in Cambridge. Thank you for the informative presentation. My question is somehow related to not so long-term goal like Professor Franco balanced, but more like a short-term one, because you've mentioned this goal of doubling the revenue of the state in the next 2 years, was it?
Yes.
Yeah. So the other question, one side is like get the state having the money, the other side is what and how it's going to be spent on. So you've mentioned a couple of priority areas, education or vaccination. We met your colleague yesterday who talked about the priority of environmental challenges. But if you could elaborate a little more, if you have kind of,
Yes.
well, of course we don't have, we
Yes.
have 10 minutes, so we don't have time for the full strategy. But if you could elaborate a little more, what in your portfolio in the government would be the key priorities and what you would like to achieve in let's say, shorter period of time than 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Jakub. You know, there are where to start, right? There are so many priorities. There are so many. Everything is you know, must be done and must be done yesterday. But one thing is, of course, you know, what you know, it's education. Education. You know, without education, it's never go. It's the best investment. It's in your own people, and it's not about technologies. The last few presidents, they were, you know, about building schools. Building schools. We built so many schools. Well, I went to on several regional trips, and of course, you know, I'm shown, you know, when I walk into this, you know, school, or they specifically pick that schools of which needs a new wing or you know, fixing a roof or something. They will take me, and the principal goes like, "No, this is leaking, and this is here, and look how cold it is." I say, "I don't care, you know." This should be done by a mayor, by an infrastructure minister, whatever. Show me what you're teaching. Show me where's the real education. You know, schools are not about, you know, walls and, you know, roofs. This is about the real content. What are we teaching our children? You know, so school. You know, and then again, of course, Kyrgyzstan will remain, you know, our main. You know, we are world champions in reliance on the international transfers, you know, labor migrants. You know, if you go to Moscow, you know, Moscow is by far, I used to say that Moscow is a second Kyrgyz city, you know, not Osh, our original capital. It's more Kyrgyz live in Moscow than in Osh already for many years. But soon, you know, if this current rate keeps, Moscow will become Bishkek, you know, will outgrow Bishkek. You know, most of the services in Moscow is, of course, dominated by ethnic Kyrgyz. They're helped by our, you know, that's the only.
The best feature of Moscow in that sense is you can mostly get Georgian food served by Kyrgyz servers. That's
right.
The meeting of Bolshevik space.
Yes. Yeah. And the thing is, of course, that of course we can, you know, all those labor migrants who go, you know, are they going just straight from the village with a very poor school education and just straight as a, you know, labor, you know, very unqualified labor, or can we have them learn some skills of qualified, you know, construction workers or, you know, welders or some other things, you know, this kind of priorities. Or can we actually take advantage of the situation here in the United Kingdom and train, you know, them as a truck drivers for United Kingdom or nurses? You know, do you know that there are around 30,000 Kyrgyz women employed in Italy, around Naples and in Sardinia, because very aging population of Italy. And the same situation is in Turkey. The Kyrgyz, you know, women, they take care of the elderly and disabled and sick. You know, there's a big, huge social services requirement. So can we teach every person like better English and better skills so that they double or triple easily their earning potential? But of course, in the big run, of course, we want to live at home. We want people to stay, not leave, you know. And a lot of people do not want to leave, you know, because more or less, you know, the salaries and all the expenses, and it's not nice, much nicer to be at home. And we will be the government which will not export all the instability and all the consumers of our services abroad, but rather trying to keep them and create jobs and establish livelihoods at home. So, Jakub, there are so many big things going on. Government revenue will be spent mostly on education, and some of it will be spent, of course, on promoting our country as a tourism destination. We believe it's important. Some of it will be spent on boosting our external representative offices, our embassies, having more people work here in London. You know, I can tell you that I always said that London is, United Kingdom will remain and is, despite what the English think of themselves, an important global player, just because they are one of the most generous international, donors, and also, they have the Commonwealth, they have the permanent seat on the Security Council, but also London is important as a world capital. So we will need our presence here. We will need our presence in these important institutions like Cambridge University to reach out to the future leaders like you. You'll be governing your countries or running big organizations or corporations, and we need to build a goodwill with you and have a better educated world leaders, in Kyrgyzstan. So, embassies will expand in their scope, hopefully, in their operation. But if I'm allowed, Dr. Saxena, I can conclude that yesterday I saw this article in The Economist, and while they praised the elections, they said that the elections were the cleanest in history. They would not be The Economist if at least they did not admit that fact. But of course, they continued and went on about the Tagish regime, about all the former, they mentioned they wouldn't name me. They named a quote. They put a quote by me. I said, "This country will take off as a rocket," said a vice prime minister. They wouldn't mention me, but instead they mentioned one that notorious customs official, a billionaire. They mentioned him 5 or 6 times in that short article. So they still believe that Economist still lives in the past. They're talking about the news which are not news in Kyrgyzstan. We're talking about the future. And instead of educating and informing the global audience what's happening now and what will happen tomorrow, they're talking about all the old news which are not interesting to me. Is it interesting to discuss in this country, for example, what happened to Jeremy Corbyn? Probably it's very interesting. Probably you will find in an audience. Probably, there's a book or two to be written and, discussed, but, you don't write about Jeremy Corbyn. This what happened, or Brexit. Brexit is also an old story. You go on, but instead we tolerate that the international opinion is formed and shaped by the stories from the past. I want to be.
Your taxi is here.
I want to say that I'm very happy to have this opportunity. This afternoon, I'll receive a visit by the Marshal of the Diplomatic Corps. He will, say hello to me on behalf of Her Majesty. This afternoon, I'll host a small reception, and tomorrow I will fly away. This will be last time. The government also provides, they have a big ceremony when you meet. When they meet ambassadors, they put you through VIP room, and also when they send off, there will be a send off by the Foreign Office. This will be, I am here as the departing ambassador, not as a deputy prime minister, but I hope to be back. Dr. Saxena, thank you very much. And thank you, my friends in the international community. Peter, thank you so much. Thank you. And I hope to be back, and I will be back. We will be working and hard to win your support, but we will not rush. We will show by results. Thank you very much.
We are with you.
Thank you.
Yes, I would like to say bye to Zoom. We hope many of you will join us on Monday for the conference starting. And please do register as soon as possible. So, bye to Zoom. Thank you.
If you come here, we don't have any in-person pictures with you
Oh, yes?
since the last 2 years, so I think this is the perfect opportunity to do it. So all the MPhils, all the students come on.